Welcome to this demo of doing data analysis in VS Code with Malloy. The dataset we're going to be looking at is from the FAA and it includes information about flights in the United States. The first statement here is a Malloy source declaration. A source in Malloy you can think of as a database table or a view with additional metadata on top of it. We haven't defined any of that metadata yet, but you'll see what that looks like in a second. The first thing I want to do here is run a quick query. And I want to get a sense of what are the different carriers. So who are the different airlines and how many flights do they have? Basic query, we can see WN has about 88,000, US has 37,000. Let's do something a little more interesting. I want to get this as a percentage. So I can say count divided by all of count. All is a special Malloy function that escapes the grouping calculation. So this is going to calculate the flight count, and then it's going to divide it by the total number of flights. So we can see here WN has about 25.7% of the total flights. Now, one of the great things about Malloy is we can take these aggregate calculations and make them reusable. So in the source, I'm going to define a measure. I'm going to take these things that I've defined down here and add them as measures. So I'm going to say flight count is count, and then add percent of flights, and that's going to be the flight count divided by all of flight count. And I'm going to add a tag here, and this tag basically just tells the VS Code renderer to render this numeric value as a percentage. So now I can just reference in my aggregate clause of my query, I can just reference those measure names, and it's going to run the same query. So that kind of shows how to use measures as how to save calculations on your Malloy models. I'm going to do something a little more interesting here, and I'm going to actually save this as a view. I'm going to say the by carrier view is, and then I can just copy and paste this text. And we'll go over exactly what this is doing. So flights now, if I run the schema again, I can see by carrier shows up as a potential query I can run on top of flights. So I can say run flights by carrier. And it gives me the same result set. I'm going to add another view. And this is going to be by origin. And in this case, I'm going to look at origin airports. And I want to calculate that same set of measures. I'm going to calculate the count and the percentage of flights going by origin. And in this case, just run this query again. And now we can see, looks like Atlanta has about 5% of the total flights and about nearly 18,000 flights in total. One of the interesting things about Malloy is not only are queries reusable, not only are measures reusable, but queries themselves are reusable. So I can see here I've got by carrier and by origin. I'm going to use something called the refinement operator in Malloy. And I'm going to nest by carrier. So what this query is doing is it's going to say I'm going to run the by origin query, which is what you see here. And for each row in the by origin query, I want to nest by carrier. This is going to say for each of these origins, calculate the flight count and percentage of flights for each carrier within that origin. So the result set is pretty interesting. We can see that in Atlanta, it looks like Delta is the top carrier with about 47%, and Dallas-Fort Worth has American as the top carrier with about 49%. And this repeats for every single origin airport. So we get a sense here of which airports are hubs for which airlines. So really interesting information, really interesting insights. This is really the power of Malloy in using queries as the unit of composability. This query here is actually very simple, and the analysis is very rich and information dense. And this is something that's not possible in SQL, simply because in SQL, each of these different queries needs to be written from scratch. Malloy gives you the ability to encapsulate the complexity and reuse it and recompose it in any way you want. Hope that was interesting for you, just a sneak preview of what's possible in Malloy. If you're interested, I'd encourage you to check out our documentation, our samples repository on GitHub, and also our Malloy Slack community where you can share any interesting things you're doing with our language.